dissects, she explains and clarifies. Your Rosetta Stone to understanding legalese. She is Rumbidzai Venge on Capital 100.4 FM.
The news team for giving us the news bulletin in Shona and Isindebele. We are in the second hour of the deep dive and we get straight into the exchange. This evening, I am joined by Rejoice Ngwenya, representing the Association of Older Persons Organizations. Good evening, Rejoice. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I always love to be on radio. You know that, yeah.
Fantastic. No, we appreciate the time and the valuable insights always. This evening, we are looking at a really worrisome trend. I mean, I saw this coming out of Parliament, who flagged this issue. And of course, the issue is around Alzheimer's and dementia. And I think the figures were quite staggering. If memory serves, we were looking at almost 9 or 10,000 people suffering from dementia and other related diseases, from Alzheimer's. And this is set to, almost triple, rise by about 94%. So we're going to be looking at about 20,000 older persons suffering from these diseases. These conditions, these ailments, and of late, I've noticed as well, on Facebook, on social media, on WhatsApp, always a message saying, have you seen my elderly father? Have you seen this person who has just wandered off?
Right.
Yeah. So maybe some people might not even, understand or, bring it into scope. So this is why we wanted to have you on the show to just paint a brighter picture. Could you, let our listeners know, why this issue is such a big concern? Was Parliament exaggerating? Is this the state of affairs on the ground?
Well, you see, you'll notice that, if you study the older persons trend globally, as industrialization and development improves and enhances, you get more older persons because the health systems are more sophisticated and so forth. So all along we used to just assume that dementia and Alzheimer's diseases are the Western disease, disease yabarungu and all that. And this is why studies are very clear that mainly in the African population, the behavior of older people is generally associated with witchcraft, with carelessness, type of thing. So really, dementia is basically a symptom of the disease, of the Alzheimer's disease, because the disease itself is the one that has clinical issues around the brain, cells. So as a result, it then spills over to the cognitive side of the person. And as an older person organization, we are talking about, just yesterday, when we were talking about it, saying, look, we need to bring back the culture of looking after our elderly, so that we are able to understand the behavior of our elderly persons and be able to tolerate. But, like I said, it's the stigma is almost like a century old. So it will take time for Zimbabweans to actually accept and adopt. But I'm glad that, the movement towards the social care, globally by Zimbabweans has given them an exposure to how to deal with this thing. And I'm glad that the association in Zimbabwe is beginning to bring this at parliamentary level. And it's good that the awareness, caravan is taken off a Rumbi.
You mentioned the very real, stumbling block, the very real challenge that it's something, it's punishment for something that they've done. There's witchcraft, there's, all of this. How are you as an organization, navigating these challenges, that one in particular? We'll move on to some of the resource challenges as the conversation continues, but that perception challenge, How are you, as the older persons organizations in Zimbabwe, navigating that?
Well, as you know, that we are an umbrella body of different organizations that have constituencies around the older persons. So at national level, our responsibility is to focus on policy issues. This is why, our petitions in Parliament have caused so much debate and dialogue in Parliament, because we are not a programs institution. We are a policy administrative type. We discuss policy issues, and we feed into government policy. Of late, really, we were invited to attend some a policy issue to do with all the persons, and our member organizations are the one that then send to us these kind of key areas. And one of that area, like I said, is the understanding, appreciation, just the knowledge, the campaign around Zimbabweans understanding that older persons have certain conditions that they have tolerated. So it's a really our responsibility is to say to government, look, can we strengthen the advocacy, the policies, and the laws around protecting this very, very vulnerable group? And then the programmatic side of it, the actually boots on the ground, we leave that to the member organizations. But for us, sitting in Parliament and arguing a case for constitutional and legislative reform is where we come in. And then, of course, we then collect this information from different, because each organization is a specific constituency and there are specific issues that deal with that constituency. So we collect this, sit around as a board and see how best to have strategic action points around those areas. Then, of course, the stigma issue is one that we are really, focusing on in a campaign that alerts the society and the young generations that look after the old people, hlalani nabo, garai nabo, so that we're able to understand and appreciate their behavior. We are probably the lost generation, who were quick to take our parents to old people's homes. But I think that's going to be changing in the next coming year or two.
How do you mean that we're going to have more old age homes, sunshine homes, retirement homes? Is that a better way to do it?
No. When I'm saying things about change, I mean, in the short term, you can understand that, we have always been quick to submit these elder persons in older persons' home. And of course, even the health system itself has been very lax in terms of the way that, older persons are treated. So since it's a clinical issue and a social issue at the same time, it's going to have to be a parallel strategic trajectory. So when I'm saying things have to change, are about to change, I'm saying since the government is already talking about specific policies that target, and of course the association itself, it really means that the more we keep away all the persons from all the persons' homes, and the more they are accepted by society, we need to train the younger couples, the younger generation about how to manage this thing. Because I say the movement around caregiving in the world is such that there must be some kind of permeating effect in Zimbabwe. So we need to set ourselves those milestones for me that in the next coming 2 years, there should be an overemphasis, a deluge of information and also appreciation of the disease and of course the condition of dementia.
I'm with you now completely. I follow. Let's look at the other great concern that also came out of the report from Parliament, which is, because it's still a pertaining issue, the resource argument that there just is not enough to create social safety nets specifically for older persons suffering from Alzheimer's and other related conditions, dementia included under that umbrella. So much so that families who do take in their who start to suffer from Alzheimer's are doing it without any support. They have no money to do so. And it gets very, very difficult.
Right.
Yeah. Where, if you were, in this, this position that you sit in as a conglomerate of all these organizations setting forward all the person's rights, where is the pot that, that is going to cater for older persons, living with Alzheimer's and dementia, not to mention some of, the other conditions that affect older persons?
When economists sit around and talk about the macro and microeconomic fundamentals of Zimbabwe, there is always an emphasis that Zimbabweans are one of the most taxed nations in the world. And every time before a budget statement or a budgetary pronouncements, there is always an additional tax here and there. And see, this is where the point is that we need to have a central government that commits itself to ensuring that the health systems and the health value chain that looks after elder people is enhanced. We are constantly told that we have 65 minerals, and luckily the government has been talking about value addition internally. So really the point is possibly that of budget prioritization, because we cannot sit back from there and say there is no money. These older persons are the persons that have been working for this country for the past 30, 40 years. And of late, we have heard that NASA has also been asked to explain in court why some of these payouts are pittance and the levels are not defined. So really, it is the responsibility of stakeholders to sit around and say, how do we scrape the bottom of the barrel, and asking questions. That if the national fiscus we're always being told that ZIMRA has achieved its objectives, and the national fiscus, the targets have been met. And the question then is, where is the money going? So there might be a need. Parliamentarians can continue the rhetoric of making noise, but we just want the metrics now. We want economists and stakeholders to sit down and say, right, how do we then parcel out this money in terms of ensuring that it is this group is protected? But of course, it's not just about government. From me, I mean, I'm a liberal, and I generally believe that the private sector and individuals also have resources. If we have foundations like the Alzheimer's Association, AOPA, and these are the fresh points where I think the stakeholders should also contribute, because we can't just look to government to say they should. We have roads to build, we have railways to build, we have everything. So we need to ensure that the stakeholders, the private sector and civil society also find ways of scraping the bottom of the fiscal barrel, so that we deal with this issue in a manner that does not strain national resources.
There have been calls made for a national dementia strategy, a national Alzheimer's and dementia strategy. What key elements would you like to see as an organization, representing all the persons, included in such a strategy? At this conception stage, what should it include? Is there a place in there? Will there be a place in there for the caregivers to also get some sort of, support, emotional, physical, financial support?
Absolutely. Because when ASCO, our previous organization, or ourselves are looking at these things, we give it a broad-based approach, a bigger picture, because apart from Dementia and Alxheimer, there are other issues as well that relate to older persons, access to public, services. We talked about pensions, we talked about even home care and so forth. So we would want the dementia policy to feed into other strata that relate to older persons, because we don't want to overemphasize one aspect of the older persons. Like you're saying, that when there could be an older person who is at home looking after 6 Vazukuru, and he does not suffer from that. So when we talk about caregiving and subsidizing that individual, it has nothing to do with dementia or Alzheimer. So you can see that as AOPO, we want to to culture and discipline ourselves that we look at different strata. Dementia and Alzheimer that's the health side of it. There is the social side of it. There is the technology side of it. There is the political side of political participation. So, but I mean, you're right that each of these strata should have its own strategic, policy, and they should all converge to ensure that the older person, lives in dignity, and when they leave this planet, they leave this planet comfortable, and society has to take that responsibility.
You do mention the health side of things, and I want us to just venture a little bit into the capacity. Do we have enough healthcare services? Do we have enough, trained personnel within this country right now to actually diagnose and to manage dementia across the country?
You ask a very pertinent question because I can tell you, Rumbi, that if you go to First Street tomorrow morning, one out of every 3 young people that have finished college or that are roaming around must have undergone some kind of social welfare training, whether they've done it through. I'm saying this out of experience because even 2 of my children, or even 3, they've undergone that. So already the curriculum is focused around that. What is probably lacking are the practical means of doing so. So in terms of skills, I think we have a huge base of skills relating to social welfare care. But the only challenge then is that, are we as a country able to employ these young people? Because out of those, 1 out of every 3 of them, probably 2 of them are busy preparing their passports to go out of town, out of Zimbabwe. So it means then that, like we did with HIV/AIDS, remember in the 1980s or 90s, the family was given that kind of tuition to be able to manage, healthcare around HIV/AIDS, and this is what we should be focusing on, rather than looking specifically at individual qualifications of our children. Perhaps we should see how to empower families who are then be able to cope with this. But you're right, this whole funding situation that we've been talking about, we must be able to do a health audit to see how many of these young people are trained as social welfare officers, can be absorbed locally, so that we invest not just in their training, but in deploying them to community as community workers who rotate rather than being maybe living in-house. But this requires money, and we're back again to Professor Mtulisinobe's budgeting system that really, as much as we talk about teachers' salaries and nurses' salaries, well, why don't we look again at this critical element, so that, as I said, our older persons live in dignity and respect.
So it is quite literally, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, the situation that we find ourselves in, because I remember the last time we were talking about issues to do with retirement, we were talking about old age poverty, we were talking about those very real concerns that just don't have enough funding. And this is yet another issue that needs an urgent response. So how does government, how do local authorities, how do health institutions, how does civic society come in to prioritize?
What is so irritating about this work that we are doing, is that every time you turn to institutions that are supposed to be focusing on the welfare of citizens, you are told there's no money. And whereas the next minute you open news, you're told that our gold exports have exceeded 25 tons. We have got the best lithium, resources around in the world. It seems like Zimbabwe, we've got the best of everything except those resources trickling back. So this is why I'm saying that I think stakeholders must be able to sit around and say, okay, all these metrics that we are getting from the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, from the Reserve Bank, we are controlling inflation, from the gold, we are exporting tobacco in tons. The question is, are we failing to manage our royalty? ecosystem? Where is it that is there accountability in terms of, because if we don't ask those hard questions, we are still going to get back to the situation where officers on the ground, if you go to a clinic right now, they'll tell you we have no money to do that and that and that and that, which is true, because allocation is just theoretical, but the actual physical money coming to this institution is not going to be there. So this is our responsibility as a national organization. It's a responsibility for all national organizations, the ZNCC, CZI, the Chamber of Mines, the Doctors Association, the Teachers Association, to ask those questions. If we are declaring these huge metrics in terms of our exports and our retention, how is it that that little bit of portion of money we are talking about, enhancing the wealth of citizens is missing? So I don't think that it's not that there's no money. But I think we need to relook at our accountable systems and be able to justify why the metrics are going up there in terms of our returns and GDP and growth projections. But in terms of social welfare, the social safety systems, we are still getting pensions at $50 per person for somebody who stays in Mausekwa or Nwedza, and they can't even afford to come to Harare. So I'm saying, myself as an economist, I'm saying, we should sit down as economists and ask those questions. Where are the resources going if we have these brilliant metrics? This is a brilliant position to start from.
It really does. It boggles the mind. It also, it enrages you at the same time. Makes you feel very, very, very empathetic for all the people who are suffering due to all the cogs that are maybe not in place at the moment. And in that breath, maybe we can switch gears, pun intended there, into what practical advice. Let's take a look at, the families who are maybe starting to grapple with the fact that, their sekuru, their father, their mother, maybe going through some behavioral changes. They are losing time. Their memory is lost. What practical advice can you start to give families who notice some of these changes? And something also very shocking. I don't know if this is within, your knowledge, that there's early onset Alzheimer's, a lot now, and even dementia that is, manifesting in younger people. So whether it's a younger person with early onset Alzheimer's or early onset dementia, or it's an older person, how are families supposed to treat this person? And, what are the red flags? What can they do when they start to notice differences in behavior?
The dissonance that is there, the kind of discrepancy that we always get, Rumbi, in this generation is that we are sitting on sophisticated technology. Our laptops, our smartphones, they have all the information. So our young generation is focused, they sit on these machines, looking at the wrong things. Yes, we want to know Beyonce's latest thing, whatever it is. But let's not always say that there is no information, we don't know what to do. I'm so grateful that we have institutions, for instance, like Alcohol Anonymous Association. We've got institutions that deal with that, issues of cars, emergency and all that. And all we need to do now, maybe as an organization, is to strengthen the information, base around these national institutions, so that we have, for instance, a 24/7, emergency call or whatever. We can get these young, brilliant IT specialists, these young people who can do startups. You just press a button and you are told exactly what to do when there's an emergency. Every time there's a pop-up that says, if you have an elder person who is more than 50 years old, these are the symptoms of onset. I sit there in my board and I'm like, guys, if I had started this institution 10 years ago, preparing for myself to be in my 70s, would be somewhere now. So let's use the technology, let's use AI, let's use the machinery at our disposal to pass this information. However, families have to know where to go if there is a problem. So this 911 approach that I was saying to you, maybe the information, knowledge or the base can be created by all national institutions that are to do with business, with social welfare, with health. They could have some kind of information base where their members can phone in to say, look, my father or my grandmother is behaving a bit funny. Is this the onset? What can I do? Go to AI, go whatever. I mean, we could talk all night, but I'm saying there is so much information. All we need to do is to alert families what to do, where to get the information from.
We are receiving messages from our listeners, and this one in particular caught my attention. So Wellington Ngwenya says, our social security arrangement is mere posturing. Old people who have worked their entire lives end up pitiable destitutes on top of everything else. On top of it, private insurance arrangements that they enter into are messed up by past currency debacles, which in fact were shrouded in clouds of open fraud and corruption. So Wellington is in Kamuzu.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You agree with that?
Absolutely. Rumbi, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. You can go ahead. Your thoughts to his sentiment.
No, we were talking about it yesterday, saying there was the Justice Smith, commission. There was the report. There's huge. There are billions of dollars that were lost during the transition from the Zim dollar to US dollar, and these institutions that had been collecting our monies while we're at work, they seem not to be responsible. You can't just sit back and say, oh my goodness me, the 60,000 US dollars that had accumulated in your life pension was swallowed by hyperinflation. No, that's not good enough. Because when these institutions were taking money, and I think IPEC should take responsibility for this. When these institutions were taking money ever since the 1970s, that is, these elderly were working, they were investing it in buildings and hotels and skyscrapers. And we're like, no, this is where the investment is. We can't just sit back and say that, we don't have the money, as we don't want to start mentioning names. But your caller is very right. That is totally irresponsible on this of these institutions. Just sit back and say our savings were swallowed by hyperinflation. No, our savings were invested in buildings and in stocks, and liquidate those buildings and make sure that those contributions are taken back to where they belong. So the excuses that there's no money and all that, I'm afraid it's not going to fly. So your caller is right. I mean, I want to put it this way, there's probably criminal negligence on the part of these institutions. And I think somebody, at least if we set a precedent, in this NASA case, I'm sure it's going to trigger a lot of class action when these institutions have to be made responsible.
An opening of the floodgates, as it were. But who will tie the bell onto the cat, Joyce? Who's going to tie the bell onto the cat? That's the issue.
Yeah.
But you make some.
Look, I mean, continue.
You make some pertinent points there. Which brings me to the next, point. How can, the fourth estate? How can members of the media fraternity come in here? On the one hand, to highlight even, some of the things you were just saying there, the past injustices, then, currently to raise awareness around the stigma, that surrounds dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Do you know, Rumbi, I've been in the media, fraternity, with the media fraternity for the past 30 or 40 years. And every time there is something new, the media gets together and say, guys, how do we adapt ourselves to this new movement, whether it's AI, when we crossed over from the 1990s into the millennium, during, constitutional reform, during COPAC, the media is one of the most powerful elements that can move this whole program in terms of knowledge management. So I believe that perhaps as AOPO and other institutions that relate to older persons, I think let's invest in bringing the media together so that we have a proper specific media policy that has to do with these issues that relate to older persons, because they might be suffering from stigma as well. They don't know how to report, what to report about it. They see the synonymity of these clinical cases. Some of the individuals in the media, they don't know the difference between old age and elderliness and Alzheimer disease and dementia. So I think you make a very good point. I think in the next coming few 6-7 months, I think we might need to activate some kind of national conference for media and publishing sector, so that we talk about these things. We bring in experts. How best can we communicate this thing? What are the flash points? What is the, so that our media is equipped. Much like we have agricultural reporters, we have industrial report, we have financial stock exchange. The specialists are there. So now, like once Vincent Kaya once said to me that we need specialized reporting now. So who knows, maybe in the next few months, we might have to look around for resources to bring the media together to say, guys, this is the new problem that we have, to do with elderly persons, drugs and so forth. And how do we create specific, information trajectories to keep our nation informed? You make a good suggestion, really.
Absolutely, because if we don't do that, we're going to have nearly 20,000 plus cases, in the next year, if the projections are correct. And that for me is really scary.
Because, before I joined this association, when I started, my other side, it was just to do with bringing retired professionals together so that, the society can benefit from these idle skills. And suddenly I bumped into this, I'm like, seriously, all the persons have more problems than just being called together to come and share their expertise. So you can imagine that even at my level, it took my own initiative to step into this ecosystem of the older persons. Imagine if I had no interest, I would be sitting here just saying, my mother-in-law, maybe she has got lots of memory, maybe we are Zenzisa. But now when she does things, I sit here with my wife and say, because I'm in the middle of the train, I understand their behavior. And I sometimes even say to my wife, take her from wherever she is. Let's stay with her and understand her behavior. And goodness me, I just wish I'd known about these things 15 years ago. We would be somewhere. But this is kind of knowledge at micro level that we are saying, even those individuals that are enlightened, in enlightened families, they might not be aware of it. So the media is very important in terms of empowering family members with knowledge of how to handle this thing. And I'm sure on a national scale, we should be somewhere in the next coming 5 or 6 years.
Definitely, I like the sound of that. There is hope. There's light at the end of the proverbial tunnel. As we start to, wrap things up in this conversation, let's look ahead, Rejoice. What are the priorities for the older persons organization in advocating for older persons affected by Alzheimer's and dementia?
You asked a question that we were dealing with yesterday, saying there is no amount of rhetoric and stirring the hornet's nest at ground level, at local level, if there is no supportive legislation and other instruments that have to do with enforcement. So it is important that we follow the trail of what the parliamentarians have been talking about, so that when we then get to the policy, validation workshop that's going to be coming in anytime soon through the Ministry of Social Welfare, we want to make sure, first of all, Rumi, that the legislative instruments are in place, the national policy is in place, so that when we then go to the ground, it becomes easy to implement when you have got specific legislative milestones. Because if you don't do that, there won't be accountability. There will just be, as your caller said, hot air and rhetoric. So we need to have the necessary policy in place, the necessary legislative instruments for enforcement, and then we can use those as the tools for information, enforcement, and awareness. So that's where we are looking forward. Let's start off at Mount Hamden first, then we go to the ministry first, and then at least we can then be working downwards towards the communities at local level.
Another message coming in from our favorite older person, Elder Samanyanga in Banket. And he says, oh, thank you so much. At least something for us, the elderly. Thank you so much, Legal Bay. So he's tickled pink that we were talking all about older persons in this conversation. So there's a lot to be done in this conversation. But I think for now,
And before, Rumbi, and before you run away, before you switch me off, let's not forget artists, the musicians, the drama guys and all that, because these things are very important. So we can't just talk about media. Let's talk about also the artistic side. We need to have songs about it, plays about it, and skits about it, so that we're able to empower everybody. Because, as an artist myself, do I sound like I do everything in life? I'll be sorry about that. It's important to equip everybody, musicians, actors, and of course, as you said, the media. Thanks very much.
Fantastic stuff. We will look for a play starring Rejoice very soon, unpacking the plight of older persons. Listen, thank you so much once again for your insights, for your time. This is in no way a conversation that has been exhausted. We look forward to speaking with you soon and hopefully hearing that the needle has moved forward to the advancement of all rights for older persons, and that a lot more is being done for this really scary and increase in Alzheimer's and dementia within older persons. But for now, I think we can leave it here. A good place for us to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Rejoice. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye.
Well, there you have it. Quite a lot to be done when it comes to the plight, to the welfare of older persons. And I was equally shocked. My jaw dropped when I had a look at Parliament's report. It's not a game. There are several people suffering in silence, and there is little to no support. But if you know someone who is suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, there is an organization that you can look out to, that you can reach out to, the Zimbabwe Alzheimer's Association, and they will offer you support and help. But we need a lot more done at the national level. We also need a lot more done in terms of stigma and what we can start to unlearn and stop doing within our homes. Just thinking that, old age equals witchcraft, or, something happened to this person, or, it's a consequence of something that they did that was perhaps occultic. So a lot of things that we need to do there. But what I really did take away from the conversation was we need to take care of our older persons, because guess what? You are on a moving train. And very soon you are going to be getting to the end of the tracks. Who's going to look after you? So it's something to keep in mind. My guest there was Rejoice Ngwenya, representing the Association of Older Persons Organizations. And we were unpacking and understanding dementia and Alzheimer's, breaking the silence on Zimbabwe's growing elderly care crisis. Remember, conversations like this don't have to end here. It's always good if you can implement these things in your daily life, and we certainly are not going to stop here. We intend to also, bring on board the various ministries, and just try and uncover, what stakeholders, what policymakers are doing to ensure that this is not the norm and that the older persons get the help that they need. The station is Capi Talk 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat. And I'm still receiving your messages. Baba Tensen Panyamweda in Mondoro, thanks so much for that. Muvangeri Simbarashe Kwarairwa, I see your message there, out of fidelity. Thanks so much. Paul Matika wa Molly in Mount Pleasant is connected. Matibaba Shepherd Katana in Guruve. Pachikokonya is also listening in. The Mashija Twins Association, as per usual, are locked on. King Pastor Solomon, good evening. I had missed this message, but quite pertinent to the discussion that we were having. And you say the high rate of dementia and Alzheimer's amongst Zimbabwe's elderly could probably also be associated with emotional stress. due to financial pressures that most elderly people are facing, having lost their pensions. And you say, secondly, the lack of proper activities to keep our elderly people fit and active and busy enough to keep their minds sharp. So again, we really need intervention from central government to provide financial security for elderly people so that they can currently carry the burden because they're failing to provide for themselves because of the issue of loss of their pensions through hyperinflation. This duty then falls upon their children, and this becomes more harm than normal. We are also needing to create a national understanding about what elderly people should be doing to keep healthy and mentally active after retirement too. There are also spiritual problems causing those mental conditions, but any pastor at a good Pentecostal church should be able to address them. King Solomon. And such people will be healed by God. That's Pastor King Solomon coming in with his views there. And also condolences for Sharon Mukokota are still pouring in. She was a dedicated listener who went on to higher glory. And we're shocked to receive the news, but really, really will cherish her and remember her fondly. Good evening to you. This one is coming from Baba Junior Benuraba Hopefully. Thanks, Baba Junior, for that lovely message. Victor Maurukira, good evening. You say greetings to Beauty Alpha, Eunice Leon, your mom and your wife Happiness, who are in Greenwood Park. Mr. Stanford Tuma representing Highfield. Seguru Kiki Pa Chizipiti, you say you had a great weekend, you went to church, and you'd like to say sorry on the passing of one of our listeners, Sharon Shame. Maikila Natilila also saying, Shakaitika. And Mama Madi, you say, Hatarwadziwa, Unumuswa 14 July, Chinoti, Anzitaitoti, happy birthday, Kwari Nesuro Munu, Agunza Shaya. Such is life. We've got to reflect on the good moments, Naika. Terence Ngazimbi also, Ngobatana Maupanapa, Tichingo Tondera Mwedu, Asisipo. So, yeah, those are some of the issues that we are dealing with this evening. And, of course, once again, to the Mukokota family, Tine Urombo Nematambuziko. And I think please just keep us posted, Ana Gary, Ana Mama Madison Jr., on the arrangements so that we can, do what we can to give her a fitting send-off. The station is Capitalk 100.4 FM. That is Heartbeat. The news bulletin is up next. The news at exactly 8 o'clock. And thereafter, we get into the Gravitas Zone. You want to learn a lot more about emotional intelligence. The second part of that discussion coming up with Joseph Mkhanyi in the last and final hour.
We talk, we vibe, we elevate. Capitalk 100.4 FM. The voice of the Estate. 9 years of sizzling hot radio from the hub of business, culture, and entertainment. Capitalk 100.4 FM. Harare's Heartbeat. #9 and fly.
This is Salman Tukuzi. You're listening to Rumbidzai Venge.
Radio redefined 100% plus 4. Ito, the Harare Drive on Capital 100.4 FM.
Yes, Mashirapa H-Town on a Monday. Hello, Red.
She dissects, she explains, and clarifies. Your Rosetta Stone to understanding legalese. She is Rumbidzai Venge on Capitalk 100.4 FM.